Chhebaliya to Mandla. The Narmada's water has become crimson in the morning light. Where sunlight does not reach, it is blue, yellow, or even green in parts. In the distance, it is brown. Water is strange. It has no color of its own, yet it can have all the colors of the rainbow on its palette. Shapeless in itself, it can take on innumerable shapes. It has no voice, yet its thunderous roar reverberates over long distances. It is inert, yet when roused, it rushes with violent speed, furious strength, and frantic energy. At the sight of its serene tranquility, we become meditative. Its wrathful aspect alarms us. It bestows blessings in the form of life-giving rain. But when water goes wild, it disrupts and destroys life. Water is extraordinary. A river is the largest and best source of fresh water. For thousands of years, mankind has been drawn towards rivers, not only because they quench our thirst and the thirst of our fields, but because they nourish our souls as well. Rivers influence our being in a most profound manner. All the foremost cultures in the world have come forth from the wombs of rivers. Indian culture is the gift of the Ganga. However, though the Ganga is the greatest, the Narmada is the oldest river. When the Ganga did not exist, the Narmada was already flowing. Where the Himalayas and the basins of the Ganga and Yamuna stand today, in the distant past, there was a shallow sea. A shift in the earth's surface transformed that sea into the Himalayas and gave birth to the Ganga-Yamuna plain, a process that took millions of years. Leaving Chhebaliya, we took a footpath alongside the waters of the Narmada. Steep bank, deep water. In 3 hours, we managed only 5 kilometers. Thinking at this snail's pace we will still be in dense forest at nightfall, we took to the higher path. By now, we had become one with the wilderness. For 7 days, we had seen no roads, no bicycles, no electricity. Most villages did not have a single shop. Modern civilization had not reached this area yet. We arrived at Sahajpuri before dusk. Mr. Katare, the headman of this village, welcomed us. He had completed the parikrama of the Narmada. His son brought flour and rice to give us. We had run out of flour. If we did not take the flour now, we would have to subsist on rice alone. But since we had never begged for food, we could say neither yes nor no. I asked Pandey, "Well, my friend, do we need flour and rice?" Pandey murmured hesitatingly, "I suppose we don't really need them, but since they are being offered, we should not refuse them." Yadavendra hastily packed away the flour and rice in his pack. We then made our way to the banks of the Narmada, where we spent the night in a hermit's hut. There was a stream and a beautiful garden surrounded by tall teak trees near the hut. The peace and sacred atmosphere of an ashram surrounded us. We slept out at night beside the fire. The river bank, the dense forest, and the open air, it was wonderful and cold. The sun was shining brightly when we awoke. The patter of dewdrops falling from huge teak leaves sounded like soft taps on a drum. After bathing, we had a chance to talk with the hermit. He had a beaming, childlike countenance. He would not hear of us cooking with our own rations and gave us rice. When we left at noon, he accompanied us for quite a long way. It will not be easy to forget the hermit at Sahajpuri. A dense forest began after Tatighat. We came across 1 or 2 people on our way. but it was just the three of us for most of the journey. Pandey, my friend, if you were alone in this thicket and a tiger came along, what would you do? I inquired. Pandey shot back, I won't do anything. Whatever has to be done will be done by the tiger. It was evening when we reached Patha. We stayed in the school in Patha, finding a durable building to lodge in after many days. We also found a post office for the first time on our journey. It was in the house of the school headmaster. We all wrote letters home. We woke up early the next morning and went to the river bank. We bathed in the waterfall of a stream where it joined the Narmada. It was the weekly market day in the village. I noticed that even the poorest of the poor village women could not resist buying bangles. What better adornment than inexpensive and pretty glass bangles for a married woman? On the second day there was thick fog. The sun was nowhere to be seen. Even when it emerged from the blanket of mist, it was as milky as the moon. Over in the west, the copper-tinged moon was still visible. A newcomer would find it difficult to distinguish between the moon and the sun. The scene brought paintings in the Kangra style of Indian art to mind, in which Krishna wears Radha's clothes and Radha wears Krishna's. Today, the sun and the moon had exchanged clothes. We set out early on the third day. Women carrying huge sheaves of paddy came from the fields. Every day I had seen village women carrying heavy pots of water on their heads, climbing the steep banks of the Narmada. I had also seen them pounding and grinding grain from 4 in the morning. I wondered what vitamins and protein they got. Nutritious food is necessary, I thought. However, it is equally necessary to extract every bit of nutrition from whatever we get to eat. Flood water runs to waste. Every drop of canal water reaches the fields. We reached the Balai river at noon. I was so wrapped up in watching its lovely cascades that I didn't even realize when Pandey and Suryakant walked past. Crossing the Balai, I went on with Yadavendra. Dense forest and deserted footpaths. What if Pandey and Suryakant were lost? I became really worried. Yadavendra began drawing arrows along the path. We walked up to a hillock and sat there waiting for them. Almost an hour later, when at last they both came into sight, safe and sound, our happiness knew no bounds. Those arrows had turned out to be very useful. As we went on, a village came into view. We stopped there for the night. 10 days later we saw a road, electricity poles and wires. There was no footpath from here. The road was laid along the river bank. The smooth-surfaced road had replaced the winding, meandering, rough and rugged footpath. The challenge of the footpath had been replaced by the convenience of the road. It was already dark when we reached Chirai Dongri. We unloaded our bags and sat down opposite a small roadside restaurant. The restaurant's charcoal stove was empty. Yadavendra cooked dinner on it. Afterwards, we found the school building and decided to stay there for the night. In the morning, Yadavendra announced, "Our rations are about to run out." Suryakant had been keeping track of the money. "Our money is about to run out too." He added, "At the most, we can buy 2 days' rations. An army cannot march on an empty stomach. So far, we had drunk milk twice a day. Now and then we had enjoyed the occasional kheer, often going so far as to buy condensed milk. These luxuries had drained our meager finances. From today, all these would have to be stopped. Even so, this was no solution to the problem. As we bathed in the Narmada that morning, Pandey said, "Mother Narmada, show us a miracle today. Let a 100-rupee note come floating along." We were all worried about our finances. I just hoped that we would not be reduced to begging for our next meal. After lunch, we had just slung our bags on our backs when along came a bus. It stopped, and out of it came my brother-in-law, Hari Bhai. He had been interested in our trip from the very beginning. I was very pleased to see him. He asked us how we were getting on. I replied mildly, "We are short of cash. We need some money." He instantly gave us a 100-rupee note. Pandey was delighted. "Look," he said, "Holy Narmada heard our request." Along the way, we came to a hot spring, bathed, and continued on our journey. We spent the night in a farmer's field. All through the night, we could hear the gentle murmur of the Narmada. The sounds during the day drown the musical tone of the river. It surfaces in the silence of the night. The next morning, we found a track again along the Narmada. The Sahasradhara was not far off. We could even see the temple spires in the distance. Our pace quickened as if pulled by an invisible string. Soon we arrived at the Sahasradhara. Right in front of us were clusters and clusters of cascades. The milk-white water was reminiscent of coral tree blossoms. What are these cascades if not sprays of blossom on the river? And the Sahasradhara is an arbor of blooms, a gorgeous garden of white flowers. Spellbound, we stared at the sight in front of us. The rocks of the Sahasradhara, black as collyrium, are so hard that over thousands of years the water has done no more than chip at them. The Narmada has become a sculptor here, carving the rocks into all sorts of shapes and forms. A vast exhibition of abstract sculptures. This art is thousands of years old, yet it could quite easily be dubbed a gallery of modern art. We had to go on. Mandla was still about 6 kilometers away. Pandey's relative, Mr. Pathak, lives in Mandla, so we went to his home. He was delighted and said, "Now you are not going off anywhere else. You are staying here." He instructed the servant, "Cook an excellent meal. They have been living on coarse country fare all these days." We put away so much food that day. The next morning, we went to Rangrej Ghat, where we bathed in the river and duly completed the first part of our journey. On the third day, we caught the bus home despite Mr. Pathak's protestations. Continuous exposure to the Narmada's splendor had put us in the state described on the old song. For all of the day and all of the night, we were intoxicated with joy. Our minds were filled with glorious memories. The Narmada veiled in mist at Badahai Khera, the Kirtan on Sarad Purnima, the hermit at Sahajpuri, the wild woodland at Tati Ghat, the village women trying on bangles in Patha's weekly market, the soundless solitude of the forest, the cascades of the Sahasradhara, the waterfronts of Mandla. Our journey had lasted only 15 days, but in those 15 days we had been overwhelmed with riches. The forms, colors, and flavors of the Narmada were even now simmering within us.